Good morning. So glad you guys made it. Glad that you survived the rain. Everybody's doing okay, right? You didn't melt or anything. Normally, when it rains here in Southern California, attendance is down about 30% or so. So you guys made it with the Storm Watch 2019. Good news is, though, Facebook is up 30% today. So welcome everybody watching tonight online on Facebook. Hey, I remember whenever my wife told me that she was pregnant with our second child. And man, I was just over the moon pumped. And then we found out it was a boy. Remember that moment whenever you found out, okay, the sex of the baby? And I had a girl first. And so now to have a girl and a boy, like I just started imagining all the different things that we would do together. I mean, I imagined watching him play Little League baseball. I remember imagining us like watching like NBA playoff games together and just all these different emotions that I had. And then I'll never forget, we were at church on a Sunday morning when my wife was pregnant. We had some missionaries that were here, and we were out at a restaurant, and we got done. Shannon went to use the restroom. She came back out, and she said, we need to go to the hospital immediately. And I said, what? She said, my water broke. And I looked at her dress and said, yes, we need to go, okay, to the hospital immediately. But the challenge is she was 6 weeks early. And so Braden, I was in the labor delivery room. He was born, and right after he was born, you know when things aren't quite right, the doctors know things aren't quite right. And all of a sudden he came out. I remember he was blue as could be, and they rushed him out of there. And immediately our hearts just dropped. And I remember Shannon and I just started praying, and then we found out shortly after that his lung collapsed, and we were like, oh no, and we just started praying. Have you ever been in that situation where you just feel desperate? Ever been in a situation maybe when your son or your daughter is unhealthy? Maybe they're sick. You're at this point of just desperation. The only thing you know to do is just to cry out to God. That's how we felt at that moment. Well, we got some good news. After 13 days of him being in the NICU, he finally got released to be able to come home. So he came home, and we thought things were going to get better, but they didn't get better because he started throwing up every day. He would throw up, 4, 5, 6 times a day. We kept taking him back to the doctor, and the pediatricians couldn't figure it out. Then we got sent to this specialist and that specialist, and we were going all over the place. And we would bring him to church, and his head was all broken out. I mean, he was scaly. I mean, just had white all over him. His eyes were swollen shut. It looked like he had been in a boxing match with Evander Holyfield. And every week we would bring him, we would drive him off to the nursery, and people here at the church, they had all kinds of remedies for us. They said, we know what will heal your son. And whenever like a baby's coming by, everybody's like, ooh, ah. Well, whenever they would see Braden, they would say, ooh, ah. So people were desperate to be able to help us this season. So one person in the church said, mayonnaise. If you just put mayonnaise all over his head, it'll just clear him right up. So sure enough, we went to Stater Brothers, and I got one of those giant, mayonnaise things. And I was like, you know what? It's called Miracle Whip for a reason, right? So we put mayonnaise all over his head, and didn't do a thing, but our sandwiches were so much better after that. But then we were at church one Sunday, and this lady, she was dead serious. She said, listen, I know exactly what will help your son, what will heal your son, all this stuff, take it all away. She said, goat's milk. She said, if he'll just drink goat's milk, he'll be fine. So sure enough, that day, man, I left church, went over to Stater Brothers again, got some goat's milk, and took it home, and we immediately gave him some goat's milk, and he started drinking it, and I'm telling you, this fast, the lymph nodes behind his ears swelled up. They were like golf balls behind his ears. We had to rush him to the emergency room to make sure he was okay. And I told Shan that day when we were at Kaiser, I was like, listen, no more church remedies. If they don't have MD after their name, we're not listening to anybody. No more. We can't do this anymore. First the Miracle Whip, now ER today. It's no more. It was hard on Shannon and I's marriage, though, because he kept throwing up, and we didn't know what to do. And Shannon's trying everything, and he required a lot of attention. He required a ton of time. And you know, I felt bad because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to support. I didn't know how to help, but he was just constantly throwing up. And Shannon just felt like, man, what are we doing wrong? And it was depleting upon our marriage. It was depleting just in our family. And we were just going through this season of, how long is this going to last? You know, I mean, 6 weeks, you know, turned into 6 months of just constant attention and constant throwing up. And I wondered, is he going to be his whole life like this? I remember watching this movie way back in the day called Bubble Boy. Anybody remember that movie, Bubble Boy? It's like, you know, the kid was so sick, he didn't have any immunity. They just put him inside of this giant bubble, and they just, like, you know, kicked the ball everywhere. And it's just kind of how he went everywhere, and life was just in this giant bubble. I thought, is my son going to be Bubble Boy? Like, is this it? I want to tell you a story today in the Bible about a father who had a sick child. And this father was in desperate need to be able to see something happen with his son. He was lacking hope, and he was looking for hope. And we're in this series called Jesus, Hope for Humanity. And this last year, I kind of set out this challenge that we're going to study the entire book of John this year. But we're going to put it in these little seasons, these little episodes. So this is season 2, almost like when you're watching Netflix. You know how you get through one season and then you start the second season? This is season 2, so we're picking it up at the end of John chapter 4. We've already studied John chapter 1 through 3. If you want to watch any of those, you can watch all of our messages on demand through our website. But we're picking it up at the end of John chapter 4. And here's the story. There was this man who was a government official, and his son was sick. His son was literally on his deathbed. And this man, he was looking for hope. He was looking for answers. And they had tried everything. And here's this little boy in pain. Well, this man heard that Jesus was coming to this city, Cana. And Cana, it was 16 miles away from where they lived in Capernaum. Now, because of the topography and because of the terrain, it was about a 4-hour journey, walk, to be able to get from Capernaum to Cana, where Jesus was. But this father was willing to do whatever it took to be able to help his son. He had heard the stories about Jesus' miracles. He had heard the stories that Jesus had the ability and power to be able to heal people. So he said, whatever it takes. So sure enough, he leaves his city there at Capernaum, and he goes on this 4-hour trek to be able to get to Cana. And sure enough, he sees Jesus. And I'm sure the moment whenever he locked eyes on Jesus, his heart was beating fast. He's like, here he is. So he immediately goes over to Jesus, and he's like, you've got to help my son. My son is sick. My son is about to die. Like, we've got to go, like, right now. Like, we've got to go back. You can heal him. You can help him. And then Jesus says something really weird to him. Jesus says, and I don't know if he was just talking to him. I don't know if he was talking to all the Jews around. But Jesus says to this guy, he says, hey, do you have to have a sign to believe? And the man just went flat-brained. And the man was like, listen, Jesus, we don't have time to go down any rabbit trails right now. I don't have any time to talk about science, anything like that. You got to go. Like, let's go. Like, now. Come on. Like, he's going to die. Like, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. And Jesus looks back at this guy, and he says, go home. Your son will live. That's all Jesus said. And I don't know what his tone was like when he said it. I don't know what Jesus' pitch was like when he said it, but however he said it, this man immediately believed. And it says that he left there, and he didn't even go immediately home. He just believed that his son was okay. So he set out the very next day on this 16-mile trek from Cana back to Capernaum. And if it was me, I would have been like running, okay, like sprinting, like taking off, and then, you know, coughing up a lung, like, oh man, like, okay, I got to slow down. And he's on this trip back, and he gets to the halfway point. And at the halfway point, all of a sudden, he runs into some of the servants that work for him, some of his employees, some of his people that were there, met him halfway along the way. And they looked at him, and they were like, you're not going to believe it. We were just coming to find you. We were taking this trip over here because your son is well. Your son is alive. He's healed. He's good. And the man says, what time was it when he got better? And they go back and they're like, I don't know, let me think. What time was it when we started getting better? They're like, it was 1 o'clock. And the man says, 1 o'clock, really? And he does the math in his head, and he's like, that is the exact same moment, the exact same time when Jesus told me, go home and your son will live. So sure enough, he's with his employees, he's with his people. They go and they take the rest of the trip home. They get home. He sees his son walking, who was on his deathbed before. Man, they embrace, they hug, they celebrate, they cheer. He invites all the friends and all the family over. He's like, we're throwing a party tonight. And everybody gets together, and they have that moment where they're going to make a toast. And he stands up, and the father says, my son was about to die. But it's because of this man named Jesus who just spoke the word. And all he said was, go home and your son will live. And I believed him and I took him at his word. And he says, and sure enough, here we are. Son, stand up, show him, walk, jump, look, he's healed. I want to read you the story now. It's in John chapter 4 and verse 46. It says, as Jesus traveled through Galilee, he came to Cana, where he had turned the water into wine. There was a government official in nearby Capernaum whose son was very sick. When he had heard that Jesus had come from Judea to Galilee, he went and he begged Jesus to come to Capernaum to heal his son who was about to die. Jesus said, will you never believe in me unless you see miraculous signs and wonders? The official pleaded, Lord, please come now before my little boy dies. Then Jesus told him, go back home and your son will live. And the man believed what Jesus said, and he started home. While the man was on his way home, some of his servants met him with the news that his son was alive and well. He asked them when the boy had begun to get better. And they replied, yesterday afternoon at 1 o'clock, his fever suddenly disappeared. Then the father realized that was the very time Jesus had told him, your son will live. And he and his entire household believed in Jesus. Now, I want to just give you some lessons today that I learned from this passage of Scripture. 5 lessons. You might write them down if you're taking notes today. The first lesson is this. Position and power don't exempt you from need. Position and power don't exempt you from need. Here is a man that was a government official. He had national standing. He had social standing. Here's a man that was popular, he was powerful, and he was prominent. But there was this saying that happened in Jewish time. It was a Jewish saying that happened in that day and time. And here's the saying. The black camel of grief kneels at every man's gate. The black camel of grief kneels at every man's gate. Listen to me closely. Every single one of you are going to experience something that money can't get you out of. Every single one of you are going to experience something in your life that your title, your position, whatever power you have cannot get you out of the situation. Every one of you are going to be at a place where you need help, and you're going to be at a place where you need hope. No matter how much money you have, no matter what your title is, no matter how many people, when you say let's go, go. Position and power don't exempt you from need. That's why I like to say, dig your well before you're thirsty. Because there's going to come a day when every one of you are going to be thirsty. And you should dig your well. That's the reason why the church is so important. That's the reason why growth groups are so important. That's the reason why faith is so important, because there's going to come a time when you're thirsty and you should dig your well before you're thirsty. Here's the second lesson that I learned from this. As God, He wants you to seek His face more than His hands. See, Jesus, he said this to the man. He said, do you have to see signs? Do you have to see signs and wonders for you to believe? Is it just about the miracles? If you don't get what you want, are you going to walk away from me? This past Friday, I was at the gym, and I was working biceps. I was doing some curl. I was doing a curl for my girl, Shannon. All right, so I was doing a curl, and while I was doing a curl, all of a sudden this song came on my Spotify that I'd never heard before. And I stopped for a moment when I took a break, and I got on my Spotify. I was like, who sings this song? This is an amazing song. And I found out it was this lady named Natalie Grant. And she had this song, and here's what it was called, More Than Anything. And here were the lyrics that I heard while I was doing this bicep curl. Here's what I heard. Help me want the healer more than the healing. Help me want the Savior more than the saving. Help me want the giver more than the gift. Help me want Jesus more than anything. And I think that's exactly what Jesus was saying to this prominent man. This is exactly what he was saying to this government official. This is what he was saying to all the Jews that were nearby at that time. Is it just about what you can get from my hands? I want you to seek my face more than my hands. Listen, I want you to experience my presence even more than you desire my power of what I can do. I think we've all been in transactional relationships before, haven't we? We're like the kid that just says, Dad, give me the car. Dad, I need money. Come on, give me more, give me more. And we're like these entitled people. If we don't get what we want, then we get ticked off. How dare you? You're my dad, supposed to give me everything. You're my mom, supposed to pay for everything. Are you kidding me? Starts young, right there. And here's what Jesus is saying. He's saying, I want you to experience my face as much as you want my hands and what I can give you. Here's the third lesson that I learned. God is not just the God of time. God is the God of timing. He's not just the God of time. He is the God of timing. Here's this guy, frantic, coming to Jesus, saying, come on, we got to go. Let's go. Come on, now. We got to move. We got to make it happen. Come on. Anybody else wired like that other than me? And like, Jesus, you're moving too slow. Well, we got a trek. We got 16 miles. We don't have time for all the signs and wonder business. Let's go. Let's go. My son needs to be healed. And here's what the man mistake. Here's the mistake that he made. The mistake he made is that he thought Jesus had to be in Capernaum to heal his son. See, this man made the mistake that the boy could have died. And guess what? Jesus could have rose him from the dead. See, we don't always understand God's timing. And can I tell you, God is never early. God's never late. God is always right on time. But have you ever had a prayer that you've prayed that God didn't answer? Maybe some of you are praying a prayer right now and God's not moving fast enough for you. You're like, come on, let's go, move, hurry up. And we think God's surprised by what's happening. Has it ever occurred to you that nothing has ever occurred to God? God never goes, whoa, didn't realize that was going on right now. See, God is not only the God of time, he's also the God of timing. I've been in situations where I'm like, God, come on, move it. But an estimable amount of damage happens when we try to rush the things that God doesn't want to be rushed. I remember when we were in our old building in Yorba Linda, and our church had grown rapidly. We went from 1 service to 4 services. And then we got to a place where we stopped growing. And when we got to a place where we stopped growing, we started praying for a new location, or we started praying for something else. And at that time, the plan was we were going to tear down our building and we were going to build a new, brand new, huge 500-seat worship center right there at our current location. And that was the plan, and that's what we were praying for, that we wanted to see God do. But then we got into some things where it wasn't going to happen. Then we're like, does this really make sense? And we grew like 250 people in 1 year. We're like, listen, for us to be able to invest this much money into this thing and then come right back into this thing, and we're going to be back in 4 services and traffic jam and everything, the day that we opened it back up, and we called a timeout and just said, you know what, we don't believe this is it. But can I tell you, just as your pastor, for 6 years, we waited for God to open up the right facility in the right place. And in that 6-year period of time, I kept saying, God, come on, move faster. We're ready. And God said, no, it's all in my timing. God, I think God said, Brian, I want to grow you a little bit more. You know, Crosspoint, I think I want to grow you guys a little bit more. And sometimes God, it's almost like a stoplight. He gives us the green light, and it's like, go. And don't you love it when it's all green lights? Isn't that awesome? It's like, here we go. Yeah, this all the way down the boulevard. Just keep it going, God. But then sometimes God gives us the yellow lights, and he says, slow. Not yet. Wait on me. I want you to trust me. Are you going to try to do this in your own power, your own strength? Or are you going to trust me through this? And then sometimes God gives us the red light. And I don't like the red lights. The red lights are no. There's go, there's slow, and there's no. And sometimes God says, I want you to align your desires with my will. And God says, when your desires align with my will, then you'll start seeing some yellow, you start seeing some green lights. But right now, your desires aren't aligned with what I desire at this time. I'm so glad, though, in those seasons of times, as I look back, God taught me this in the middle of waiting, when God wasn't moving fast enough. Marry the vision, not the plan. See, because if I would have married that plan, I would have been really disappointed. See, if I would have married the plan of tearing down our building and been there, we wouldn't be here right now. And most of you wouldn't be here right now because you wouldn't be able to fit into our worship center. If I would have married the plan instead of the vision, I would have been very disappointed. 13 times we had 13 buildings fall through. See, but God says, no, I want you to marry my vision, not your plans. Because plans change, but the vision stays the same. And God is not just the God of time, he's the God of timing. And here's the 4th lesson that I learned. Jesus is the hurt healer. He's the hurt healer. And you know what I love about this man? He heard Jesus say, go home and your son will live. And it says, this man believed. You want to take stress out of your life? Just believe Jesus in his word. Know his word. Get in his word. Today is an important day for me and my daughter today. We celebrated yesterday. We are at 509 Bible reading streaks on the YouVersion app. My 11-year-old daughter, she's 509. So yesterday we went to Yogurtland and we celebrated reading the Word of God. And I told her, I said, listen, this is what we have to do in order to not be stress-filled. We've got to understand what is God saying, and we've got to read it, we've got to know it, and we've got to believe it. Because our feelings will change. We go up and down, but you got to know the Word, you've got to read the Word, you got to believe the Word, and that's where your stress lowers. And here's the crazy thing. It says that the man didn't even go home until the next afternoon. Listen, if it was me, and if I didn't believe that he was going to get healed, I would have started on a truck immediately saying, I don't know, I got to come all the way back 4 hours and get Jesus. It didn't work the first time. But this man, he even waited till the next day before he went home. Why? Because he heard the word of God and he believed the word of God. You know, my son, after 6 months, you know what we found out? He kept throwing up. He had a dairy allergy. And Shannon would eat dairy, drink dairy, and then breastfeed. Then he'd throw up 4, 5, 6, 7 times a day. And you know what we learned? We learned that God can heal. And God can heal either miraculously or God can heal medically as well too. He'll use both of those arenas to be able to heal. And I remember that moment when we found out that this is the issue. And you know what? He still has a dairy allergy. We just don't give him dairy anymore. And guess what? All those dreams that I had whenever he was a little boy, they're all coming to pass. I got a picture of me and Braden. This is from yesterday. His team's going to the Little League Championship game. We're pretty pumped about it. So this next week, they're going to be playing in the championships. He plays first base and loving it. And here's what I love. I love the fact that those dreams that I had of him when he was just a little baby, God answered those prayers. Not necessarily in my timing. Went through a lung collapse, went through 6 months of throwing up. But man, I'm living out some of my dreams right now. And you know what we did last night? We watched the Warrior basketball game together. And you know my favorite part was when he came over, put his arm around me, put his little head right here on my shoulder. And we just started watching the game together. See, Jesus is the hurt healer as well too. And maybe you're here today and you need some healing for your hurt. I want to tell you that Jesus is the answer. And the final thing I'll share with you is this. Our God stories, they inspire other people to believe as well. Don't just keep the God stories yourself. You've got to share them with other people because your story is the second greatest story ever told. Your God story is the second greatest story ever told. You say, what's the first greatest story? That's the story of Jesus. Jesus' story is the greatest story ever told, but your story is the second greatest story ever told, and you got to share your story. And some of you, maybe you need a crawl or a walk before you start running and sprinting and sharing your story. So let me just give you some one-sentence evangelism. Yeah, maybe that's too much for some of you. Let me give you some one-phrase evangelism. Here's how I share my faith with people. Whether I be at the gym, whether I be in a restaurant, wherever it may be. Listen, when somebody tells me about something that God did in their life, I just say, go God. And all I'm doing, I'm just planting a little seed of the gospel right there in them. Letting them know that I'm a follower of Jesus. And when people say, hey, how are you doing? I don't say good. I don't say fine. I say, I'm blessed. You know why? Because I want to plant a little seed, a little phrase of the gospel. And when somebody tells me something amazing happened in their life, sometimes I just sit back and I say, only God, because I'm just using a little one-phrase evangelism. Only God could have done that. And sometimes when people are going through struggles and hurts and challenges and they share those with me, you know what I like to say? Can I pray for you? And sometimes when I'm feeling really bold, I'll just put my arm around them. I'll pray for them right then and there. Whether it be in the lobby of this church, I'll pray at Chick-fil-A. I even pray in the non-Christian restaurants like Chili's. I pray at the gym, wherever God leads me. Why? Because I believe Jesus is the hope of the world. And I want to do anything short of sin to make it hard for people to go to hell. And you know what I believe about many of you? I believe that you believe Jesus is the hope of the world as well. And you know what I believe about many of you? You want to make it hard for people to go to hell as well. And you have a Jesus story. You have a story of hope, and God has used your story, and now you got to share your story with other people of what God has done in your life. I want to leave you with 2 stories quickly. First story is this. We have this couple named Walter and Megan here at our church. They were in the first service. And Megan, she actually wrote down on her connection card that she was having some challenges with her sister that had been going on for years and years and years. And there were some relational challenges. And she said, just pray for that. And then she said the very next day that she was in her car and it just came upon her, God was just saying, you need to call your sister right now. Well, she turned on the radio instead. And on the radio, the song, It Is Well, was playing on the radio. And Megan said right when she heard that song, she was like, I got to call her. So at that moment, she called her sister. She took some responsibility for what she had done wrong. She asked her sister to forgive her. And they began to talk through reconciliation that had been years and years and years in the making. And she just took that step of courage, the step of faith to be able to heal this relationship and do her part. And, you know, when it comes to relationships, you can only take care of your side of the street. She was taking care of her side of the street. She didn't know how her sister was going to respond, but she did her part. And her sister actually reciprocated back. And she went home. She was so excited. And she told Walter, her husband. And Walter said, "Did you get the email from the church today?" And she said, "No, what was it?" See, because here's what happens. Every time you write on your connection card, there's a group of people from here at the church that come in every Tuesday and they read over and they pray over every one of those prayer requests. And not every time, I mean, they're volunteers from the church, but sometimes some of them will actually send an email to you back saying, "Hey, I prayed for you today, specifically for whatever it may be." And that's exactly what happened that day. And Walter said, "Hey, we got this email and it said, 'Hey, Megan, I'm praying for you and I'm praying for your sister and I'm praying for reconciliation to happen.'" And he said, "Did you know that this email was sent to you at 11:11 a.m.? And she said, "Hold on a second." And she pulled out her phone and she looked and she said, "I called my sister at 11:12 a.m. See, I believe when we work. But when we pray, that's when God works. I told you this story today about this guy that went through a health challenge and how God came through. And not only did it affect this guy, but his story affected the story of his entire family. I want you to hear another story that just happened recently here at our church of God on the move. Watch this.
I was really anemic, really tired all the time. I couldn't eat. Nothing sounded good. I'd go into the grocery store and I couldn't understand why I couldn't go down the meat aisle. Just no energy. I'm just thinking, I'm just tired. I'm doing too much. So slow down a little bit and it'll be fine. And then we discovered it's stage 3 cancer.
And it was after about two and a half years of doctors not diagnosing the problem correctly, and it came out of nowhere.
I was very scared. I honestly didn't think that I was going to make it through. In the back of your head, and your heart is saying, you're going to do this, but then you're thinking, wow, is this my time? We've always been faithful. I mean, we go to church, and I think when it happens again to you, it does test your faith.
The surgery got scheduled, and Elisa went septic, but it went from what it was from June 29th to August 13th to much worse.
There was a point in the hospital when really just peace just kind of comes over you and you just kind of surrender yourself, which is what I had to do. And I think once you surrender yourself, that's when I think God starts to work. Because before that, it was me trying to do all of these things. And once I surrendered, those things didn't matter, and it did become easier.
And then after that, it was 3 weeks
In the hospital.
in the hospital in recovery, 2 weeks in the ICU. And during that time, everyone was there. I mean, she was not alone in the hospital at all.
My sisters, my mom stayed with me the whole time in the room. As I was starting to come around, I did notice, my sisters praying with me, which didn't really happen before. I mean, it really didn't. Because we've been going to church for years and they've never come with us. Last Christmas, there was a challenge. You would put someone's name on an ornament on the Christmas tree out in the front of the church of who you wanted to come to church. And so my sister put my sister Jeanette, my sister Jennifer, and her uncle Larry. She put them all on the ornament and put it on the tree. And we went home and we were talking, and Alexis had said, well, I put your guys' name on the tree to come to church. And didn't think really anything of it. And then the following Sunday, they all came to church.
And then her sisters and their husbands start going to church with us, and her mother all the time. And then Elisa decides she wants to be baptized. And then her sisters decide they want to be baptized. And then a few weeks before Easter, Larry says, I want to be baptized. These are all these miracles that just keep getting bigger and bigger. And the Easter was just wonderful. We had 3 rows of family there.
If I hadn't gone through this, do I think that my sisters would be where they're at? No, I don't. I think that God put us through this. This was our journey. This was His plan. Every 12 weeks I go for a CAT scan, and it's always makes you nervous because then you're getting results that do you really want to know? And this one was no different. It makes me nervous. And so a few weeks ago we did that. And this time he came in and he put everything up on the monitor. Then the other doctor came in and they both were all, there are no signs of any cancer left. And he said, there was one area I was really concerned with and there's nothing there. And I was just kind of just sitting there. I didn't really know how to take it. And that's when I kept asking my sister, did you just hear what I just heard?
There was just a whole lot of little miracles along the way, and they just kept connecting the dots that kept moving to more and more powerful things.
My faith, I was pretty private. The people around me that were around me all the time knew, but I didn't branch out around me. And I can see that how important that is now, is to branch out. Because these are little miracles, and if people can just feel or see these little things that happen, it makes a difference.
You look back on it retrospectively, and you see all the good that's come out of it.
We can see that God is making a difference in not our lives, but the people that were affected around us.